We begin with a very rare thing in Washington these days. One of the president's own men calling Donald Trump out in public.
And the man who did it is one of President Trump's closest allies, Attorney General William Barr. Barr slammed the president for putting pressure on the Department of Justice to go easy on a convicted felon who is a longtime Trump supporter. Jaws dropped all over Washington today when that happened.
KCAL 9 political reporter Randy Page is here now with that story. Randy.
I have to tell you, we honestly thought this would be maybe a slow news day in Washington.
Not so far.
Not even close. Very few people in Donald Trump's world complain publicly when they feel the president has gone too far, let alone William Barr, who critics complain acts more like president's personal attorney protecting him instead of representing the people of the United States. But Barr did complain today about the president's behavior, and it sent shockwaves around the nation.
I cannot do my job here at the department with a constant background commentary that undercuts me.
Attorney General William Barr, for the first time, blasting President Donald Trump for interfering with the Justice Department. Front and center, the federal case against Roger Stone. President Trump's longtime ally and friend was convicted by a federal jury for threatening a witness with bodily harm, interfering with a federal investigation, and lying to Congress in connection with the Mueller investigation. 4 prosecutors in the case filed a sentencing memorandum asking the judge to consider the federal sentencing guidelines of 7 to 9 years in prison. But the very next day, the Justice Department, at AG Barr's direction, changed its recommendation to a shorter prison term. Then came the president's tweet thanking the Attorney General for taking charge of a case that was totally out of control and perhaps should not have even been brought.
Once the tweet occurred, the question is, well, now what do I do?
Do you go forward with what I think was the right decision, Attorney General Barr told ABC News, or do you pull back because of the tweet? That just illustrates how destructive these tweets can be, the AG said.
To have public statements and tweets made about the department.
Horrible and very unfair.
Or people in the department, or
rogue prosecutors maybe.
And about judges before whom we have cases.
Is this the judge that put Paul Manafort in solitary confinement, something that not even mobster Al Capone had to endure?
Make it impossible for me to do my job.
And that's just for starters. The top judge on the D.C. Circuit Court said judges, including Amy Berman Jackson, who's presiding over the Stone trial, will not be influenced by tweets. Public criticism or pressure is not a factor, the judge wrote. The president's involvement in the Stone case set a fire under Democrats.
This brazen assault on the independence and integrity of the Department of Justice is unprecedented.
We cannot give him a permanent license to turn the presidency and the executive branch into his own personal vengeance operation.
While the president's supporters said there's nothing to all of this.
Real concerns about overzealous prosecution more than anything else. If I thought he had done something that had changed the outcome inappropriately, I'd be the first to say.
This is just crazy. I mean, there's nothing happening here except Bill Barr, who is the adult in the room, saying, wait, look, we got a problem here.
But on Fox News tonight, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell offered this advice.
The president made a great choice when he picked Bill Barr to be Attorney General. I think the president should listen to his advice.
I think it's time to stop the tweeting about Department of Justice criminal cases.
Another voice from the Trump administration is being heard tonight. Former Chief of Staff and Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly had a lot to say as well about the president's firing of former National Security Council staffer Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman.
He did exactly what we teach them to do. He went and told his boss of what he just heard.
We teach them don't follow an illegal order, General Kelly went on to say. And if you're ever given one, you'll raise it to whoever gives it to you that this is an illegal order, and then tell your boss. On talks with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, Kelly said he will never give his nuclear weapons up. I never did think Kim would do anything other than play us for a while, and he did that fairly effectively. While serving as Homeland Security Secretary, Kelly had little to say about the president's hardline immigration policies, but yesterday told the audience at a private college illegal border crossings are not as bad as the president says they are, and that a wall doesn't need to be built from sea to shining sea. The former Homeland Security Secretary criticized how President Trump talks about undocumented immigrants.
They're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
They're not all rapists, and they're not all murderers, Kelly said, and it's wrong to characterize them that way. I disagreed with the president a number of times.
General Kelly is doing a fantastic job.
Last October, General Kelly suggested he served as a guardrail against the president's worst instincts and offered the president this advice about hiring a chief of staff to succeed him.
I said, whatever you do, don't hire a yes man, someone that's going to tell you, or it won't tell you the truth. Don't do that. Because if you do, I believe you'll be impeached.
Today, the White House pushed back on what Kelly had to say.
I was in the room with him when he actually backed the president on many of the things that he's now saying, weren't great. I thought it was a little disingenuous.
No doubt.
General Kelly's one possible regret? I'm disappointed in myself for leaving, Kelly said, but it was a killer. I mean, no joke. On Twitter, former National Security Council advisor John Bolton called John Kelly an honorable man, adding, conservatives especially have a responsibility to reject baseless attacks upon him. And so far, no comments or tweets from the president about the scolding he got today from his attorney general. Did he get the message? I'll have to wait and see.
All right, Randy.